Mr. Harris, a young and enthusiastic teacher, was excited to start his new job at Willow Creek High School. He had been assigned to room 13, a seemingly ordinary classroom on the second floor. However, as soon as he stepped into the room, he felt a strange chill run down his spine. The room was oddly quiet, devoid of the usual hum of student chatter. The walls seemed to close in on him, and the air felt heavy with an unseen presence. Despite his unease, Mr. Harris decided to ignore his intuition and set up his classroom. As the days turned into weeks, Mr. Harris began to notice strange occurrences in room 13. Books would mysteriously disappear from the shelves, only to reappear in the strangest places. Chalkboards would scrawl cryptic messages overnight, and students reported feeling a cold draft, even on the warmest days. One afternoon, while preparing for a lesson, Mr. Harris heard a faint whisper coming from the back of the room. He turned around, but there was no one there. The whisper grew louder, filled with anger and despair. "They bullied me," the voice said. "They made my life a living hell." Mr. Harris was terrified. He knew that room 13 had a reputation for being haunted, but he had never believed the stories. Now, he was convinced that something truly sinister was happening. He began to research the history of room 13. He discovered that a student named David had died tragically in the classroom years ago. According to the school records, David had been bullied relentlessly by his classmates. Mr. Harris realized that the ghost haunting room 13 was David, seeking revenge on those who had wronged him. He knew he had to find a way to help the tormented spirit find peace. Determined to uncover the truth, Mr. Harris began to investigate the bullying incident. He interviewed former students and teachers who had known David. He discovered that David had been a quiet and gentle boy who was often targeted by a group of bullies. One evening, as Mr. Harris was leaving the school, he saw a shadowy figure standing outside room 13. He approached the figure cautiously, but it vanished into thin air. The next day, Mr. Harris decided to confront the ghost. He entered room 13 and spoke directly to the invisible presence. "David," he said, "you need to find peace. Your anger is only hurting you." There was a long silence, then a faint whisper replied, "I just want them to pay." Mr. Harris knew he had to help David understand that revenge would not bring him peace. He spent the next few weeks talking to David, offering him words of comfort and understanding. Finally, one evening, as Mr. Harris was leaving the school, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew that David had found peace and was no longer haunting room 13. From that day forward, room 13 was no longer haunted. The strange occurrences stopped, and the students and teachers were able to work in peace. Mr. Harris had not only saved his own life but had also helped a tormented soul find rest. However, the story doesn't end there. Years later, Mr. Harris returned to Willow Creek High School as the principal. He often visited room 13, remembering the haunting that had changed his life. One day, while walking through the hallways, he heard a faint whisper coming from room 13. He entered the room, his heart pounding. There, standing by the window, was a young man. He turned to face Mr. Harris, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," the young man said. "You helped me find peace." Mr. Harris recognized the voice. It was David, now a young man. He had been visiting the school to pay his respects to his old teacher. Mr. Harris and David talked for hours, sharing stories and memories. In that moment, Mr. Harris realized that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for redemption. But the story doesn't end there. Years later, Mr. Harris retired from his position as principal. He moved to a small town by the sea, where he lived a peaceful life. One day, he received a letter from a former student who had been bullied during his time at Willow Creek High School. The student thanked Mr. Harris for saving his life and told him that he had finally found peace. Mr. Harris realized that his experience with David had changed his life in more ways than he could have imagined. He had not only helped a tormented soul find rest but had also inspired others to overcome adversity and find hope. And so, the story of the haunted room 13 serves as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's always a chance for redemption.